Hi, my name is Keith Tenzer, Principal Solution Architect at Red Hat. Together with my colleague Sebastian Hetze, we would like to introduce you to Podium, an OpenShift remote collaboration platform. So the idea from Podium started in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. Obviously a dark, terrible, and scary time for the entire world. And what we realized being thrust into kind of self-isolation and working at home was that we did not, even being at Red Hat, an open source company who prides itself on collaboration, have necessarily the best answer and the best collaboration tools to really work effectively in this kind of environment. And what became very clear was that there was going to be long-term permanent effects from COVID-19 well beyond the disease itself, and that is that it's going to change the way humans interact and work together, and there will be much more remote collaboration required now and in the foreseeable future. And we started thinking about this and analyzing kind of why that is, that our collaboration tools weren't really working that well when everybody was stressed in at home. And kind of what we came to there is that while every organization and company has their own video conferencing, their own chat tools and everything else, they take an enterprise approach to this. So here, an IT approach, here is everything that we have, and use it. But not a team approach really, or a project approach. And so teams kind of pick and choose what they want to use, and they use these things. And it's really kind of domain knowledge or team member knowledge of what chat rooms they have, where they're documenting things, where the information is, and everything else. And that works fine when you're meeting someone or seeing someone once in a while at the water cooler, or getting a coffee, and oh, by the way, we have this project and here's where you can find information. Oh, great, right. But when you all of a sudden move to completely isolation, or at home, or more remote based, then that doesn't work anymore. You need to be a lot clearer, and you need to have a lot more intent with how you're communicating, where you're communicating, and how you even allow other teams or other members, external members of your teams, to communicate. And so we felt that there was really a need for a platform that you click a button and it deploys itself, and not only the team but the extended team can use it with this focus on teams. And so we set out, being Red Hatters, of course, to do everything 100% open source, meaning all the components as well as the platform itself, and really one goal in mind, which was simplicity. So all tools must work with a simple web browser and no client software installation needed. And so from this premise, we went on to figure out what kind of components did we need, and what were the best open source projects to service those. And then, of course, a lot of these open source projects were not already containerized or running on OpenShift, so we had to bring them onto OpenShift, bring them together in some meaningful way, and operationalize them with a Kubernetes Operator to make it easily to consume. And so the projects we chose for video conferencing, we went with Jitsi. For real-time editing is Etherpad. For chat, we went with Mattermost. For documentation, or static documentation, or longer term reusable consumable documentation, DokuWiki. For drawing technical diagrams, workflows, those kind of things, Draw.io. And finally, a productivity board based on Kanban. So you have basically different lanes: to do, doing, done, where people can create tasks and then move them along, so team members can follow and see where is work being done, maybe where they can contribute at a given time. And so a lot of these tools are real time, feeding in to a project, allowing people to work without necessarily these kind of incidental interactions that happen in the office. So some further use cases that we looked on for this project is obviously anything remote. It doesn't have to be a DevOps software engineering project. It could be a school classroom using this, or anything else, a scientific community, any kind of project, workshop, hackathons where people aren't in the same location, or some people aren't in the same location. We also see this as a nice reference because the operator we built for Kubernetes and OpenShift is actually written in Ansible. It's based on Ansible. And so Ansible is the language we use to do a lot of enterprise IT, classic IT automation. And this journey of operationalizing, automating your applications, your workloads, and then bringing them into the cloud native context or the cloud context with containers. And all along that journey, you have Ansible as a common denominator. Is I think a very positive thing and something that certainly could be of interest in that regard. And then we see this as a reference blueprint being of interest. So how we built it. Taking, as I mentioned, a lot of these are non-containerized applications. How we went about building this platform, and I think at the end of the day, what a lot of people are trying to do is they're taking different components, bringing them together, and it's really a platform approach. Everything today is about a platform, about building a platform, and that's the way people consume things. And so you have to be able to put components together in a meaningful way and operationalize them, and that's exactly what we've done here. And then finally, anything that requires extending team collaboration, where you have people that are not direct team members, maybe indirect, that have an interest, a stakeholder in some kind of a project or the work the team is doing, you need some way to expose that, and exactly that. And so there's probably other use cases that you might think of where you could see this. So that's just what we kind of have right now or thought about. The next steps where we really see this project going is we're using Mosaic for the dashboard, which is kind of allowing us to create kind of generic dashboard interfaces to connect to different components, which we'll see shortly in a demo. But we would like to look more into Red Hat's middleware to build something that has, a UI, a more immersive UI experience. We'd like to use SSO to basically, through authentication, have kind of a single sign-on for all the components. We'd also like to integrate code-ready workspaces, which is basically a cloud IDE, into a containerized cloud IDE into this context, because of course a lot of projects, remote projects, are software development in nature, and adding some other components like, for example, whiteboarding, mind map that allows further collaboration. So we of course accept pull requests, and if you're interested in this community, you can find us on the GitHub repository sa-mw-dach/podium. And we've also committed upstream our operator to the operator framework, Kubernetes Operators. So this, if you have OpenShift, will at some point show up in the operator hub. You can also install it. There's directions on the GitHub site, which we'll see. And now we're coming to the I think the most interesting part, which is of course the demo. Kind of picking at Tesla here a little bit and setting the expectations maybe realistically for what we might see in the demo. So the first thing I would like to do is go to the GitHub repository here, and here you'll see it's documented very well what different components are there, kind of what the dashboard looks like, and of course deployment. How do you get it going? So if you're running OpenShift 4, you'll definitely want to deploy the operator, which is documented here. Otherwise, you can we have deployment templates which will work on OpenShift 3 as well. For running it on vanilla Kubernetes, it's very possible to adapt it. There's only a few things you may have to change in order to do that. And we'd be interested in if somebody's interested in doing that, working with us on that piece. So basically, let's check out Podium. So I have a project in OpenShift. We're in OpenShift now, called Podium here at the bottom. And a project in OpenShift is a namespace and a bit more, but it's basically a namespace for those of you coming from the Kubernetes world. OpenShift is, of course, Kubernetes, but a project is a little bit more around developers and teaming. So basically in operators you have, we've installed it already. So under Podium, you can see under installed operators, here's our operator, which of course is listening to a CRD, a custom resource definition, and when a custom resource is provided, which is this, basically it's going to deploy an instance of Podium. And so if we go and look at the project here, you can see there's a bunch of pods running. Most of the components are fairly simple. Some of them have the component itself in a database for storing state. The most complicated one is basically the video conferencing, which has several different components: Jacofo, JVB, Prosody, and Web for doing the video conferencing piece, which is explained a little bit more in a wiki. But basically, that's what's deployed. Everything's deployed as deployments, Kubernetes deployments. We have some secrets we're using for the databases and things, config maps for storing configuration information. There's obviously some services. They're all pretty standard. The JVB service for the video bridge for Jitsi requires a node port. So this does have, the node port has to be unique. We'll see later how we set that. And of course we have the routes, or ingress. And here basically is where we have each of the components you can access individually. But of course the dashboard is what's interesting. So we can launch the dashboard. And here you'll see basically everything kind of tied together. So in Conferencing Center, we can go directly in. We can join a meeting, for example. You can have a conferencing room like just a coffee room or something. So the goal is to kind of reproduce what we have in the office, these kind of incidental interactions, as well as provide all of the planned kind of interactions that you might see. So I can just launch this room here, and I'm in it. You can see here you can also add passwords and things like that. There's a lot of capabilities that Jitsi has. We're not going to go into all of them. But there is really some great features that project has brought to bear. So that's the video conferencing. Then we have Etherpad. So this is kind of real-time documentation. It could be used in a meeting or in a workshop or whatever else where you want to have multiple teams or multiple members of a team contribute. So here's the meeting notes example, and you see everything in purple. That's me. If someone else joined here, their text would be in another color. You can give yourself a name if you want everyone else to know who you are, or you can stay anonymous. So we really like that feature because sometimes people, aren't necessarily want to give feedback, but don't necessarily want, they want to be anonymous. So I think that's a really powerful capability for collaboration. Going on, we have WeCan, which is the productivity board, Kanban board. So here you can create a board. Then you have your kind of lanes. You can define them. Here I have to do, doing, done. And of course you create some tasks. You can move them around. It's your typical Kanban board. You can create it private or public, whatever you desire. Then there's Draw.io, which is our flowchart or diagram tool. So I can create a diagram here. Let's just do a basic flowchart. And you can quickly create things, however you want, and you can save them in various different places. So you can decide where you want to store your data in the cloud, in GitHub, wherever else. Then there is Chat, which is very similar, like I said, or like to Slack. So we have a very good look and feel, very modern. You can create your channels. If you want to invite people to this chat, you can just send a link. We're looking at integrating that in the dashboard as well through the API. And finally, we have the wiki. So this is again backed by GitHub. So you basically can check things in and out of GitHub, kind of a GitOps approach to storing this stuff, and for more static type of documentation that you typically have in projects, people that are getting involved, whatever it may be, or if it's a classroom setting, maybe the lessons for a week that are going to be discussed, or anything else there. So there's some other components here on like what the contributors are. You also have the ability to change this. This is basically a config map that manages this dashboard. So you can pick and choose what components you want. You don't have to install all these components. You can install some of them. You can add your own, and you have quite a lot of flexibility in that regard. So next, let's see actually how to deploy this. So in OpenShift, we're just going to create a project. I'm going to call it Podium-test456 and create the project. And there it is. And in Operator Hub, of course, this is where all the, how applications are typically consumed in OpenShift 4. It's through operators. And of course, we have our Podium operator. If we type that in, it's already installed. It's a cluster-wide operator, so every namespace or project you create has access to it. And so if we go in here, we're in our project. If we go into installed operators, it's going to show up. You can see here we don't have any we haven't created a CR yet, so there isn't an instance of Podium that's in this project, so we're going to create one. I'm going to change the port again because it's a node port, so you'll typically have to change that, as that needs to be unique. There's also integration with Let's Encrypt to create SSL certificates. I'm just going to not generate them right now because I don't want to waste my certificates. You can, of course, provide a salt, to which later is how we build the passwords. And then you can deploy the components. So you can decide if you want to enable them or disable them. Disable means they won't be deployed. Enabled means they will. If you deploy them and want to change them later, you can change it to disable. Then the operator will no longer manage those components. And then the other thing that you might need to change typically from time to time is the node selector for the video bridge. So here the node where this component is running needs to have a routable IP, so you'll want to put it somewhere where that's the case, and probably dictate a little bit where your bridges run, because they are it is a resource intensive type of application, because it's sending video back and forth. So that lets you do that, and then off you go. You just say create. You can also give it a name. I'm just going to do my Podium, and it's going to launch it, and then what's going to happen is it's going to start creating deployments here for the different components. So the first one is Etherpad, and basically where the operator runs, if we want to look at that right now, it actually runs in a project called OpenShift Operators. This is kind of the default location where Operator Hub operators that are cluster scoped will be installed. So an operator, again, it's just a pod, and it basically, if we look at the logs here, we can see it's deploying stuff here, and you can actually see that what it's doing is it's running Ansible. So all of this stuff is Ansible. And if we go back to the GitHub repository, I think maybe it's interesting to look at this, but going under the Podium operator, when you create using the operator framework, you can create scaffolding, which kind of generates a lot of this structure and files and things. And basically, it creates a CRD, a custom resource definition, and your operator is basically watching for when a new object is created against that CRD, which is called custom resource. In this case, we just created one. And this watches.yaml is basically a mapping that maps your CRD to a role in Ansible. So here, every time we create a new CR, it executes this role, okay? So, and that's what it just did. So if we go in then under roles, you'll see this Podium role, which is executed. And if we look at under the tasks, the main.yaml, it's going to set some facts, but basically then it goes in here, it deploys the components, and it does so by deploying each component as a role. So it here deploys the Etherpad role, the Jitsi role, matters most, weekend, etc., etc., assuming they're enabled. That's where that comes in. And you can see here that all of these, all of these kind of, variables, they're coming from our CR. So that's what those parameters we were configuring when we were deploying Podium, that's where they were. And so the role, basically, if we look at like Etherpad, which is one of the component roles, and go into tasks, main.yaml, it's using a module, Ansible module called K8s here to deploy Kubernetes objects. And again, everything is parameterized, coming from our CR, and so on. And so this is a beautiful way to really bring your applications, which are probably Ansibleized and automated via Ansible anyway, into kind of the container context, into kind of the service reliability engineering approach, which is really what an operator brings to bear. So yeah, so that's just basically what's behind the scenes there. And this is going to run for a little bit, but essentially we can go back to the project. We'll see probably most of the stuff it's rolled out. So if we go to the pods here, yeah, they're all at this point ready. And if we go to the deployments, we can see all the deployments and stateful sets and everything else. And if we go to our routes, you'll see here we have our route to our dashboard. So we can just fire that up, and there we go. We can connect to all the components. And so that's how we roll it. You just saw this, these Git plugins just populated, right? So that was in real time. And that should give you a good overview. So with that in mind, thank you for your time. I hope this is interesting. And please reach out to myself or Sebastian or through the community in GitHub. We're here and very interested if you also want to collaborate and work on this and together. So definitely take care and thank you.